Get back, everyone, stay away from him! The voice of Dr. Alistair Finch, head of the physics department at the illustrious Blackwood Manor Preparatory School, echoed through the state-of-the-art laboratory. His face was contorted in a mask of feigned terror, his hands shaking as he pointed a trembling, accusatory finger at a young black student, 18-year-old Julian Carter, who stood perfectly still, his expression a heartbreaking mix of shock and dawning horror. The classroom, usually a hub of quiet intellectual pursuit, erupted into chaos. Students gasped, their expensive chairs scraping against the polished epoxy floor as they recoiled. Dozens of smartphones were raised, their screens capturing what would become the most scandalous incident in the school's long and storied history. In the back of the room, leaning casually against a cabinet containing rare earth elements, stood Preston Harrington, a legacy student whose family name adorned half the buildings on campus. A smirk of profound satisfaction played on his lips as he watched his intricate scheme click into place. Dr. Finch was now frantically stabbing at his phone, his voice climbing to a hysterical crescendo. "Security! Get to the advanced lab immediately! I have an unstable and violent student making threats. He's completely lost control." Julian, his voice cracking with a raw, desperate emotion, tried to reason with the man he had once respected. "Dr. Finch, please, you know this isn't true. I've done nothing. I was just working on my equations. Why are you doing this?" But his calm, logical plea only seemed to fuel the man's hysterical performance. "Don't you dare try to manipulate this situation!" he shrieked into the phone. "I said hurry!" He's becoming more agitated by the second. The distinct sound of security golf carts whirred to life elsewhere in the sprawling campus, their electric motors growing louder as they sped closer to the science quad. Julian scanned the room looking at his classmates, some recording with glee, others staring in mute horror. A few who knew the truth but lacked the courage to speak against the most powerful teacher and student in the school. Then his gaze settled forward, his eyes hardening from pain into a fierce, unbreakable determination. If you're ready to hear this shocking story of betrayal, revenge, and ultimate redemption, hit that subscribe button right now, because this is only the beginning. And trust me, you will not believe what happens next. If you stand for truth and against injustice, type yes in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. But to understand how we reached that explosive moment in the physics lab, how a genius scholarship student became the target of a vicious teacher and entitled classmates, and how 60 seconds shattered their lives forever, we need to rewind to where it all began. 3 months earlier, 18-year-old Julian Carter first walked through the hallowed, oak-paneled halls of Blackwood Manor Prep. This wasn't just a school. It was an institution, a training ground for the world's future elite, where the children of diplomats learned beside tech prodigies, and a single semester's tuition could fund a small business. Julian had transferred from Detroit on a full-ride merit scholarship, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity after his single mother fought tirelessly to get him there. What the other students didn't know, what the faculty couldn't have guessed, was the sheer depth of his potential. Julian preferred to keep his background private, wanting his work to speak for itself, and it spoke in thunderous, undeniable tones. From his very first day, Julian was an anomaly. While other students coasted on family names and donated buildings, Julian operated on a different intellectual plane. His test scores weren't just high, they were unprecedented. Within a month, academic journals were inquiring about his theoretical papers. Within 6 weeks, Nobel laureates were calling the headmaster, asking about the brilliant new mind reshaping their fields. But Julian's meteoric rise didn't just create excitement. It created a threat, a profound threat to those who had built their identities on being the best. One of them was Preston Harrington. 18 years old, with a jawline that looked like it was carved from marble and a wardrobe worth more than most cars, Preston wasn't just a student at Blackwood. His family's endowment funded the entire physics program. The Harrington Observatory bore his grandfather's name. For generations, the Harringtons had been synonymous with Blackwood excellence. Preston had been bred for success, told from birth that Yale was his destiny, that he was the natural leader others would follow. He was the presumed valedictorian, the teacher's pet, the sun around which his planets orbited. His inner circle was a who's who of privilege. Bryce Covington, the star quarterback with a vicious streak. Sebastian Thorne, the slick student council president with a talent for manipulation. And Xander Vance, whose venture capitalist father believed money could solve any problem. These boys had never faced real competition, never been denied anything, never had their status truly challenged. And then there was Chloe Whitmore, Preston's girlfriend, the picture-perfect complement to his curated life. Poised, brilliant from the right family, always saying the right thing. At least that's what everyone was meant to see. Overseeing this ecosystem of entitlement was Headmaster Reginald Blackwood, a man so dedicated to tradition he seemed a relic from another era. But the most pivotal figure in this drama was Dr. Alastair Finch. 48 years old with 15 years at Blackwood, quantum physics was his kingdom. To the world, he was the epitome of academic rigor, a stern but fair defender of standards. What no one saw was the rot festering beneath his polished exterior. Dr. Finch harbored a deep, seething resentment toward students he deemed entitled or unworthy. He believed the school's rigorous standards were being diluted, that certain students were given passes they hadn't earned, that the legacy of true academic excellence was being sold to the highest bidder or the most politically convenient demographic. When Julian Carter, confident, brilliant, and utterly self-assured, walked into his advanced physics seminar, something in Dr. Finch twisted. Here was this young black man from Detroit on scholarship, who didn't seem intimidated by the grandeur, who didn't seek approval, who carried himself like he had every right to be there. And then Julian began to excel. Not just participate, but dominate. While others struggled with complex formulas, Julian was proposing corrections to textbook theories. His solutions were elegant, his insights breathtaking. He was, quite simply, the most gifted student Dr. Finch had ever encountered, a fact that filled the teacher not with pride, but with a bitter, corrosive envy. While Julian was quietly redefining the academic ceiling at Blackwood Manor, Preston Harrington was watching his birthright evaporate. For the first time in his life, Preston was not the smartest person in the room. For the first time ever, there was someone objectively, measurably better than him. And that person was everything Preston's insulated world had taught him to scorn. The breaking point arrived with the announcement of the International Young Physicist Prize. This wasn't just another competition. It was the most prestigious academic honor for a high school student on the global stage. The winner didn't just get a medal or a trophy. They received a full-ride scholarship to any university in the world, a research grant, and a guaranteed internship at CERN. For Preston, this prize was his entire identity. His father had won it. His uncle had been a finalist. This was to be his crowning achievement, the final proof that the Harrington legacy was untouchable. Everyone had assumed Preston would be Blackwood's nominee. The teachers, the trustees, even the admissions officers at Yale had all but confirmed his spot. But then Julian Carter arrived, and suddenly, Preston's guaranteed victory was thrown into chaotic, humiliating doubt. The selection was based on an original research paper, and the submissions were due in 3 weeks. As Julian's brilliance became the talk of the academy, as professors began openly marveling at his genius in the hallways, as Preston felt his throne crumbling beneath him, a dark plan began to take shape within the privileged walls of Blackwood Manor. Preston Harrington was not about to let some scholarship student from Detroit dismantle his destiny. He would not allow his family's legacy to be tarnished by losing to someone who, in his twisted worldview, had no right to even be in the same room. And tragically for Julian Carter, Preston had found a powerful ally who shared his poisonous mindset. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shatter lives. What happened next at Blackwood Manor was a calculated, merciless campaign designed to break Julian Carter's spirit and force him to leave. But they had gravely underestimated their target. It began with subtle aggressions. Preston and his crew started accidentally jostling Julian in the crowded hallways between classes, sending his meticulously organized notes fluttering to the floor. "Clumsy me," Bryce would sneer, not bothering to help pick them up. "Maybe you should watch where you're going." The comments followed, always just quiet enough to avoid adult ears. "Must be nice getting special treatment," Sebastian would mutter in the library. Xander would ask with fake concern, "Do you ever feel like you're in over your head here? The pace is just different." Julian ignored them, his focus locked on his work. He believed his intellect was his shield, that his undeniable talent would silence the whispers. He was dangerously mistaken. By week 2, the attacks escalated. Julian's private research for the competition began to disappear from the school's shared cloud server. His assigned lab partner for a critical project suddenly refused to work with him, claiming a scheduling conflict. "Nothing personal," the student mumbled, unable to meet Julian's eyes. "Preston's group just has better data." Week 3 brought direct sabotage. Julian arrived at his dorm room to find the word fraud scrawled across his door in permanent marker. During meals, Bryce would trip near his table, sending a tray of food crashing into his lap. "So sorry, man," Bryce would announce loudly to the entire dining hall. "You should probably sit somewhere less in the way." By week 4, the harassment invaded his academic life. Anonymous emails were sent to teachers, questioning the originality of Julian's work, suggesting his advanced theories were plagiarized from obscure journals. Whispers spread through the student body that his perfect scores were somehow illegitimate, that he must have found a way to cheat the system. Week 5 turned digital. Elaborate, fake social media profiles materialized, posting manipulated images of Julian with captions claiming he was a pathological liar, that he had been kicked out of his previous school, that he was unstable and dangerous. The cyberbullying was sophisticated, designed to poison his reputation and destroy his future prospects. Through this relentless onslaught, Julian Carter did something that infuriated his tormentors more than anything else. He did not break. His grades remained impeccable. His composure never wavered. He began to document everything with cold, scientific precision, time-stamped photos, saved screenshots, detailed logs with names and witnesses. He spoke to his mother but shielded her from the worst of it. "How's school, baby?" she'd ask. "It's challenging, Mom, but I'm on top of it. The work is fantastic. Don't worry about me." Meanwhile, Preston's fury was boiling over. In a secret meeting in the Harrington family's private study on campus, his rage was palpable. "We've tried everything," he seethed, pacing before his crew. "And this nobody from Detroit is still making us look like fools. Our families built this place. We are this school." The harassment reached a fever pitch when Preston's group cornered Julian after hours in the empty library, surrounding him amidst the stacks of ancient books. Bryce shoved him against a bookshelf. "Time to learn your place." Sebastian circled him. "You need to understand how things work here before you get hurt." But Julian did something utterly unexpected. Instead of cowering or fighting, he stood his ground and dismantled them with words. "Bryce, you're first-string quarterback, but you're failing 3 classes. Sebastian, you needed your father to call in a favor to get your last paper accepted. Xander, your entire application was built on your daddy's money and bought internships." His voice was calm, cutting, and carried in the silent library. "You're not angry because I don't belong. You're terrified because I do. And that fact destroys the entire myth of your superiority." The small crowd that had gathered fell silent. Chloe Whitmore watched from behind a shelf, seeing her boyfriend and his friends exposed in the harsh, honest light. "The truth is," Julian concluded, "you're not privileged. You're pathetic. And you're scared of a world where your name isn't enough." His intellectual victory would be short-lived for desperate. Entitled, "People with Everything to Lose Are the Most Dangerous Creatures on Earth." Throughout this entire campaign, one adult had the power and responsibility to protect Julian, but actively chose not to. Dr. Alistair Finch witnessed the bullying, but turned a blind eye. When Julian reported the vandalism on his door, Dr. Finch dismissed it with a cold, clinical detachment. "Mr. Carter, I think you may be misinterpreting high-spirited rivalry. What you perceive as harassment may simply be the competitive culture of a top-tier institution. Perhaps you are not as suited to this environment as we had all hoped." Julian left that meeting knowing he was utterly alone, facing a systematic onslaught with no support from the very institution meant to protect him. What he couldn't yet know was that his tormentors, humiliated and enraged, were about to escalate their scheme into a territory far beyond anything he could have imagined. If you're enjoying this story of courage in the face of injustice, hit that subscribe button now, because what happens next will shock you to your core. At the Harrington family's annual trustee dinner, a lavish event held in the school's main hall, Preston's father, William Harrington III, a man whose name was synonymous with old money and influence, held court at the head of a long mahogany table. The conversation that night pushed Preston from desperation into a state of cold, ruthless resolve. 5 generations, Preston, his father intoned, his voice heavy with the weight of expectation. 5 generations of Harringtons have walked these halls not as students, but as patrons. Your great-great-grandfather laid the cornerstone of the main building. Your grandfather endowed the physics program. I built the new library wing. This institution is our legacy. And you? He paused, letting the silence hang in the air like a threat. You are letting an unproven transfer student make you look mediocre. Preston shifted uncomfortably in his tailored suit as his father slid a prestigious academic journal across the polished table. The headline read, "High School Prodigy from Detroit Solves Quantum Decoherence Theory." There was Julian Carter's picture, his expression one of quiet confidence, with quotes from professors calling his work groundbreaking and Nobel caliber. "This," his father continued, tapping the article with a disdainful finger, "is what the academic world is talking about. A boy who has been here for 3 months. Where's the article about the Harrington heir? Where is your legacy?" The silence was broken by his father's final, devastating command. "Losing is not a concept we entertain in this family. I don't care what it takes, but you will not be the first Harrington to be shown up by a scholarship case. Is that understood?" That conversation echoed in Preston's mind as he watched Julian continue to excel, his very presence a mockery of Preston's birthright. But it was a snippet of conversation he overheard 2 days later that gave him the key to his revenge. Preston was loitering outside Dr. Finch's office when he heard the teacher complaining to the headmaster. "These students from underfunded systems," Dr. Finch was saying, his voice dripping with contempt. "They come here with their hunger, thinking raw talent trumps decades of established methodology. They don't respect our processes, our protocols. They bypass the proper channels. Who knows what corners they had to cut to get here?" Preston stopped dead. Here was his opportunity. Here was a man who shared his resentment, someone in a position of authority who might be willing to help him eliminate the problem. After classes that day, Preston approached Dr. Finch privately in his office. "Dr. Finch," he began, his tone carefully crafted to sound concerned. "I've been observing Julian Carter, and some things just don't seem to add up." Dr. Finch looked up, his interest immediately piqued. "What do you mean, Preston?" "Well," Preston continued, weaving his web of lies with smooth precision, "have you noticed the advanced equipment he uses in his personal projects? That quantum entanglement kit he has is prototype-level tech. Where does a student from Detroit get access to that? And his theories, they're so advanced, so polished. It's almost like what?" Dr. Finch prompted, leaning forward, his eyes glinting, "like he might have unauthorized access to restricted research databases. Or maybe he's being fed answers by someone on the outside. We all know the pressure these scholarship students are under to perform. Maybe he's cutting ethical corners to maintain his status." Dr. Finch's eyes lit up with malicious understanding. He had been searching for a reason to discredit Julian, and here was Preston handing him the perfect narrative. "You know, Preston, I've had my own suspicions. His work is almost too perfect. Real science involves struggle, failed hypotheses, peer review. His seems to just appear, fully formed and flawless. From that moment, a toxic alliance was forged. Dr. Finch, with his authority and deep-seated biases, and Preston Harrington, with his desperate need to destroy his rival, began plotting Julian Carter's ruin. But their plan faced a monumental setback when the preliminary judging for the International Prize was announced. The entire school gathered in the auditorium as Headmaster Blackwood revealed the results. The judges were unanimous in their decision, Headmaster Blackwood announced, a genuine smile on his face. The research submitted by Julian Carter on quantum decoherence was deemed revolutionary and has been selected to represent not only Blackwood Manor, but the entire nation at the global finals. The auditorium erupted in applause, but Preston felt the world dissolve into static around him. Revolutionary. The word echoed in his mind, a death knell for his own ambitions. The judges couldn't stop praising Julian's innovative approach, his intellectual courage, his sheer genius. The humiliation was ceaseless. That afternoon, major news networks started calling. They wanted to interview the teen genius who was challenging established physics. They wanted to feature the incredible story of the scholarship student who was outpacing the world's elite. The final, unforgivable blow came the next week when a delegation from Caltech's renowned Jet Propulsion Laboratory made a special trip to Blackwood. Not for Preston, despite his family's decades of donations. They came exclusively for Julian Carter. Preston watched from a shadowed alcove as the lead scientist shook Julian's hand, speaking animatedly about the practical applications of his theory for deep space communication. The meeting lasted 90 minutes. The scientists never once looked in Preston's direction. As Julian walked away, Chloe Whitmore, Preston's own girlfriend, approached him. "That was incredible, Julian," she said, her admiration clear and genuine. "The JPL? You're literally shaping the future." Preston felt something shatter inside him. But it got worse when Bryce and Xander found him later. "Dude," Bryce said, unable to hide his schadenfreude. "Did you see those scientists? They looked at you like you were part of the furniture." Xander laughed, a harsh, cruel sound. 5 generations of Harringtons, and you're the one who gets shown up by a guy who probably couldn't even afford the textbooks. That night, Preston lay awake, his father's words burning in his brain. Losing is not a concept we entertain. The next morning, he knew what he had to do. Preston arrived at school under the cover of pre-dawn darkness, using his master key from the student council. He slipped into the advanced physics lab. The secure storage for the department's most sensitive equipment, including the prototype quantum kit he had lied about, was biometric. But Preston had watched Dr. Finch bypass it once with a manual override code. His hands were steady as he carefully removed a delicate, crystal-based interferometer, a piece of equipment so advanced it was on loan from a government research facility, valued at over $50,000. The brilliance of his plan was its cruel simplicity. He would plant the device in Julian's dorm room, then create a digital trail suggesting Julian was planning to sell the proprietary technology to a foreign entity. Who would believe the perfect student, the academic saint, was an industrial spy? Using an encrypted messaging app, Preston fabricated a complex text thread, messages that appeared to show Julian negotiating with a shadowy contact, discussing transfer of the package and payment in untraceable cryptocurrency. He made the language technically precise, filled with jargon only someone of Julian's caliber would know, making the lie more believable. The fake conversations included specifics about bypassing security protocols and needing funds for his mother. Preston's hands were ice-cold and steady as he picked the simple lock on Julian's dorm room and planted the device deep in his closet, hiding it among clothes. Then he took screenshots of the fabricated text conversations, saved them to a secure server, and prepared to present his evidence to Dr. Finch. That afternoon, Preston walked into Dr. Finch's office with a data drive in his hand and a story designed to annihilate Julian Carter's future forever. "Dr. Finch," he said, his face a mask of grave concern. "I'm afraid my worst suspicions about Julian Carter have been confirmed." The morning that would unravel the very fabric of Blackwood Manor began with a deceptive calm. Students filed into the advanced physics lab, taking their seats for a lecture they assumed would be on quantum mechanics, completely unaware they were about to witness a spectacular public execution. Julian Carter sat at his usual station, his notebook open, his mind already working through a complex problem, utterly oblivious to the trap that was about to spring shut around him. Dr. Alistair Finch entered the laboratory, not as a teacher, but as a prosecutor. His face was a rigid mask of performative outrage. His hands clenched at his sides as he strode to the front of the class and slammed his own tablet down on the demonstration table with a thunderous crack. "Class," he announced, his voice quivering with feigned emotion. "A grave crime has been committed within these walls. A piece of government prototype equipment valued at over $50,000 has been stolen from its secure storage. A collective gasp rippled through the room. This was Blackwood Manor. Theft was something that happened elsewhere, to other people. Dr. Finch continued his dramatic performance, pacing before the stunned students. "This is not merely theft," he seethed. "This is a profound betrayal of trust, a violation of the academic integrity that this institution was built upon. Someone in this very room has abused their access and stolen cutting-edge technology." He paused, letting his gaze sweep the room before landing with laser focus on Julian. "Given the severity of this breach, I have demanded an immediate search of all student belongings and dormitories, starting with those who have the technical knowledge to utilize such sophisticated equipment and who might have external motivations." The target was unmistakable. Within minutes, Headmaster Blackwood arrived with 2 stern-faced campus security officers. The search, as orchestrated, began with Julian's dorm room. As the master key turned in the lock, Julian felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. The setup was too precise, too malicious. The door swung open. There, hidden among his sweaters, was the gleaming, complex form of the crystal interferometer. But that wasn't all. Tucked beside it was a printout of encrypted text messages, conversations that appeared to show Julian negotiating the sale of the quantum core to an anonymous buyer for a substantial sum of Bitcoin. The security guard stepped back, aghast. Headmaster Blackwood's face went ashen. The students who had crowded into the doorway began whispering frantically. Preston and his crew were right there, and their performance was worthy of an award. "My God," Preston gasped, his hand flying to his mouth in perfectly feigned shock. "Julian, how could you? After everything this school has given you?" Bryce shook his head, his expression one of disgust. "We defended you, man. We told people you belonged here." Xander crossed his arms, his voice dripping with venomous betrayal. "I guess the rumors were true. You'll do anything to get ahead." Through it all, Chloe Whitmore watched. Her eyes narrowed not at Julian, but at Preston, seeing the subtle glint of triumph in his eyes that he couldn't quite conceal. Julian stood motionless, staring at the equipment he'd never seen. "This isn't mine," he said, his voice eerily calm, a stark contrast to the hysteria around him. "I've never seen that device before, and I certainly didn't write those messages." Dr. Finch stepped forward, his voice rising in theatrical indignation. "Mr. Carter, the evidence is irrefutable. Are you going to compound your crimes with lies?" But Julian Carter, his mind sharper and clearer under pressure than any of theirs could ever be, began to dissect the situation with surgical precision. "Dr. Finch, apply logic. Why would I steal equipment from the one place on Earth that gives me unlimited access to it? Why would I risk my future, my scholarship, my reputation for $50,000 when the research I'm doing here is worth millions?" His calm logic infuriated Dr. Finch. "How dare you stand there and lecture me on logic? You are a thief and a liar." It was then that Preston decided to pour gasoline on the fire. "Dr. Finch," he interjected, his voice laced with fake concern. "He's getting agitated. Look at him. He's not acting like himself. Yesterday he was muttering about how the system was rigged against him." "I am not agitated," Julian stated, his voice still level. "I am asking for a rational investigation. Check the keycard logs for the lab. Analyze the metadata on those text messages. Any genuine inquiry will prove my innocence." But Dr. Finch was beyond reason, hurtling toward the point of no return. "Don't you tell me how to conduct an investigation?" he shrieked, his carefully constructed facade crumbling to reveal the bigotry beneath. "Your kind always has an excuse." That was the moment Dr. Finch completely snapped. His deep-seated resentments, his fury at being intellectually challenged and proven wrong, exploded in a catastrophic loss of control. "Get away from me," he screamed, stumbling backward as if Julian were a physical threat. "He's dangerous." The hallway descended into bedlam. Students screamed and scrambled back, their phones recording every second. Julian raised his hands in a placating gesture, his confusion and hurt plain to see. "Dr. Finch, please, you know me. I would never—" But the teacher was already dialing campus security, his voice hysterical. "I said get here now. I have a violent student threatening me. He's unstable and he's stolen government property. I think he might be armed." Julian felt the walls closing in. This man, his mentor, was systematically destroying his life with a series of calculated lies. He knew in that moment that reasoning was futile. As security officers burst into the hallway, their hands on their tasers, their eyes immediately locking on to him, the only black student in the room, Julian made one move. He didn't plead. He didn't fight. He simply reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and pressed a single button, activating a preset emergency signal. The head of security, a brutish man named Officer Miller, grabbed Julian roughly. "You're done, kid. Let's go." "You're making a mistake," Julian said, his voice finally showing a sliver of emotion. "I need to call my mother." "It's my right," Officer Miller laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "You can call your lawyer from juvie, you little thief." But Headmaster Blackwood, seeing the monstrous injustice unfolding, finally found his spine. "Officer Miller, that's enough. The student has a right to a phone call. Give him his phone." Julian was handed the device with trembling hands. He dialed a number, waited for the click of the answer, and spoke 2 words with a chilling calmness that silenced the entire hallway. "Mom, now." Then he hung up. Officer Miller smirked. "That's it? Mommy's coming to save you?" But Julian just looked at him, and for the first time, a flicker of something like pity crossed his face. "You have no idea what you've just done." 3 minutes later, the sound wasn't of golf carts. It was the heavy, authoritative crunch of black SUVs with federal government plates rolling to a halt at the academy's front gates. The first person to step out was a woman in her late 40s, her expression one of cold, terrifying fury. Flanked by men and women in jackets emblazoned with FBI, Dr. Eleanor Carter, Deputy Director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, walked through the doors of Blackwood Manor Prep, and the temperature in the hallway seemed to drop 10 degrees. The moment her eyes found her son, standing surrounded by security, and then took in the scene, the hysterical teacher, the smirking, privileged students, the bigoted security guard, her face settled into a mask of terrifying calm. "I am Deputy Director Carter," she announced, her voice low but carrying absolute authority. "And someone here has made the catastrophic error of falsely imprisoning my son." The color drained from Dr. Finch's face. Preston Harrington looked like he might be sick. Officer Miller's hand instinctively dropped from Julian's arm. "Ma'am, we had a report," Officer Miller began. "I've seen the report," she cut him off, her voice like shards of ice. "I've also already seen the last 48 hours of keycard entry logs for the physics lab, which my team pulled remotely 3 minutes ago. They show one student entering the lab at 5:47 a.m. today. Preston Harrington." She turned her gaze to Dr. Finch. "I've also reviewed the metadata of the text, messages you're using as evidence. They were created and sent from a server registered to the Harrington family's private investment firm." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Agents," she said, and the FBI personnel moved with efficient purpose. "Secure the scene. Dr. Alastair Finch, you are under arrest for filling a false police report, conspiracy, and violation of civil rights under color of law. Preston Harrington, you are under arrest for theft of government property, conspiracy, and cyber fraud." Preston began to sob as cold metal handcuffs were clasped around his wrists. Dr. Finch simply collapsed into a chair, his career and life in ruins. Headmaster Blackwood looked on in stunned horror as Deputy Director Carter turned her gaze to him. "Headmaster, your school is now the subject of a federal civil rights investigation. Your funding is frozen pending its outcome. In the ensuing days, under the relentless pressure of a federal investigation, the entire story unraveled." Security footage showed Preston planting the device. Digital forensics traced the fake texts directly to his computer. Bryce and Xander offered deals, confessed to the months of harassment, detailing Preston's obsessive jealousy. The fallout was swift and absolute. Dr. Finch was fired and charged with multiple felonies. Preston was expelled and faced federal charges that would ensure he never attended a university. Headmaster Blackwood was forced to resign, but the story didn't end with punishment. It ended with transformation. Under a federal mandate, Blackwood Manor Prep was completely restructured. Its admissions policies were overhauled to actively recruit gifted students from underrepresented backgrounds. The Harrington Physics Wing was renamed the Carter Center for Scientific Discovery. Julian Carter, his name cleared and his genius recognized, went on to win the International Young Physicist Prize. He accepted his medal not with vengeance in his heart, but with a mission. "They tried to break me with lies and prejudice," he said from the global stage. "They failed because truth is a force more powerful than hate. This medal isn't just for me. It's for every student who's been told they don't belong. Keep fighting. The world needs your genius." He chose MIT, and with his mother's guidance, he used the settlement from the lawsuit against the school to fund a foundation that helps gifted, underprivileged students navigate the world of elite academia. The legacy of that day in the lab wasn't a scandal. It was a revolution. And it proved that no matter how powerful the lie, the truth will always, always win. If you believe in justice and the power of truth, make sure to like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it.